We're standing along Race Street, which is across from or adjacent to what was Lawrence Park. Race Street was not here in the 1890s. It ended, this strip of it anyway, ended kind of where the jog is, and that would have been the entrance to the grandstand area and the park. We're standing along the Lima Northern, which becomes the Detroit and Lima Northern Railroad. And this is one of the reasons why the Page Fence Giants struggled with media coverage in 1897 and 1898, because the railroad came through a section of the park and it inhibited the baseball playing here because the grandstands, and it was very difficult to get to them. So Mr. Lawrence, he had said in the newspaper that he always wanted the railroad to come through his property and just knew it would. Well, in 1896 and 1897, that's kind of what happened. In 1896, the railroad approached him. He said fine. They promised him a job running the coal operation here. So he said, okay, I'll sell some of my land to the railroad. So the railroad track went right along through here. As you can see, it was laid down and went north up to Tecumseh. So this is the railroad, which has obviously been pulled up over the years, but the plan was to put a $5,000 fieldstone massive depot right around this stretch here. Well, it was never built. And what happened was the railroad basically went under after about 3 or 4 months and were absolved of their debts and were purchased by a Detroit company, which basically reneged on the deal to Mr. Lawrence. He ends up suing them, claiming that they didn't pay him for the land like they had promised. They didn't give him a job. And so, but what happened was enough construction had come on the edge of the park that it was not feasible anymore to be a ball field, and Mr. Lawrence was still holding out hope that the ball field would be taken over by either a train switching yard or coal yards or lumber yards. So basically, even though the railroad changed ownership, they did not finish the deal for Mr. Lawrence. And so he was still holding out hope in the summer of 1897 and 1898 that the ball field he would not need anymore. It would be either coal grounds or a lumber yard or a switching ground for the railroad. And so he just didn't really care to rent it out anymore, because he was hoping to make it a kind of an industrial park, which never really developed. But the railroad did come through here and went down that way. So off in the distance you can see the dome to the courthouse in downtown Adrian. And Adrian was an integrated community in the 1890s. They had African Americans living in all 4 wards of the city. They had businesses downtown on Main Street, and their children had been integrated in the public school system for several decades. As a matter of fact, one of the clerks in the courthouse was an African American man. So the Page Fence Giants really fit in quite well with a pretty progressive Adrian, Michigan in the 1890s. So one of the key points on Adrian being kind of the perfect storm for black baseball was the railroad, and you had Adrian College here, and you also had a vibrant African American middle class. And so the Page Fence Company was able to use the ball team as a marketing tool. They were on the railroad. They could get their product in and out. Their fencing went all over the world, but they could ship it in and out of the town and get their resources in. You had a progressive clientele in downtown Adrian, and they also claimed to be the baseball capital of the world, or at least in Michigan in 1894, though they had lost a series of games with Monroe and Pontiac. That wasn't very accurate. So you had a vibrant middle class. You had a railroad system that allowed travel of the team eventually. You had a major employer backing the baseball team, and then you had Adrian College as well, which was pretty progressive at the time, to kind of put all of this together to make Adrian kind of the perfect place for a black baseball team in the 1890s.